Kung Fu Panda 3 is often considered the worst of the original trilogy, but I think the third movie is on par with the rest of the trilogy and is massively overhated. The third movie picks up where the second left off as Paul is at peace with his tragic past, but his identity is yet again challenged in the third movie, as Shifu asserts that Paul does not know who he is and challenges him to stop being complacent and become a teacher of Kung Fu. And this seemed to be transitioning Poe into the planned second trilogy, where he starred as a teacher, but that plan has apparently since been abandoned with the fourth movie, at least what I've heard. I'm yet to watch it due to the bad reviews, but let's not get distracted by that. Kung Fu Panda 3 presents two main messages, that the more you take, the less you have, and if you only do what you can do, you'll never be more than you are today. Let's begin with the first message, the more you take, the less you have. That obviously applies to Kai, who is greedy and selfishly takes others' chi for his own power, but it's also a message that Poe's parents had to learn, as they were both very competitive and nervous to have Poe for themselves. But as they realizing fighting over Poe's attention isn't loving to Poe, in fact it's actually making him confused, conflicted, and uncomfortable with his identity. Whereas Mr. Ping and Mr. Panda working together and respecting each other doesn't mean less for them, it just results in a more loved and comfortable Poe. And this is an appropriate message for a family movie, as parents can reflect on Mr. Ping and Mr. Panda's resolution, while the movie also shows that not owning everything as kids often want doesn't necessarily mean less for you. It actually causes you to value what you have more and be grateful for that. It also suggests to be comfortable with who you are, as the more you take from others' personality, the less of your own individuality will be left over. The second message of if you only do what you can do, you will never be more than you are now, obviously applies to Poe, who is challenged to not be complacent and teach, something that he was initially horrible at. But when he committed himself to it and was forced to with Kai returning for the Panda's chi, he really rose up to the challenge and finally understood Shifu's message, that as a teacher you shouldn't be trying to turn the student into who you are, but instead bring out and emphasize their strengths, as Poe did with the pandas. And as Shifu learnt with Poe in the first movie, he couldn't train Poe the same way as Tai Lung. He had to find different ways of motivating him. I really enjoy how in every movie Poe is seriously challenged and on the verge of giving up, but is pushed back up by his now unified parents to train the pandas. And the animation during these training montages are beautiful, but I do also agree that they consume too much of the runtime. I also agree with the common criticism that the pandas were dumbed down too much after the second movie, that suggested they were an elegant and intelligent kind. Nevertheless, I still like the build up to the final battle and the conclusion, where Poe even gets to use his dramatic exit against Kai to skadoosh himself with Kai back to the spirit realm. And I love that we even got to see the spirit realm that had been referenced often in past movies, and how awesome the animation was there, especially with Kai's chain jade swords that really fit the vast terrain of the spirit realm. And one of the main complaints you hear about the third movie is that Kai is a subpar villain, but in my opinion, while he may not have as much personality or personal connection and animosity towards Poe compared to other villains, hence he might be slightly less interesting, I do still think his concept and design is really cool, and his ability of taking other masters' chi and using them as a seemingly endless army is very unique, and it was cool to actually see some of the other masters who had also been referenced in previous movies, but yet to be shown. And the chi ability also ensured that Poe was deprived of anyone to help him out, and really had to overcome his fear of being a teacher and finally reckon with who he is. Kung Fu Panda is also great at emphasizing the color of each villain. Chen was red for fear and destruction, while Kai and the whole movie was constantly green, which I think is referring to immortality and how Kai broken the lines between the mortal and immortal realm by traveling back to the real world from the spirit realm. But this is later transcended by the gold of Po and his master Oogway, as Po realizes that he doesn't need to enclose his identity to being a panda or a student or a teacher. He is free to draw on all of them, and that is expressed through the free-moving dragon. Anyway, hopefully I've shown that the third movie deserves a rightful place in the franchise and concludes the original trilogy well. And while I agree it's not as riveting or cinematic as the second movie, and there are aspects that could have been improved upon, like the panda's demeanor, I still think there is value in continuity, and it was an important conclusion with Po developing into a teacher. Or at least it was the fitting end until they made the fourth movie, but we can just pretend that